Hi. In this video, I want to share with you some ideas, specifically 6 ideas about how to bless others. I'm Stewart. I'm the pastor of New Life Community Church in Burlingame, California, and welcome. Glad you are here. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about blessing others and blessing others in word and deed. And we're going to use this kind of Bible study format. We're going to use Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37 in order to do that. I'm using Bob Logan and Charles Ridley Guide for Discipleship. There will be a link in the description below, so you can check that out. If you have any questions during the study, just leave them in the comments. I will come back to those and check those and reply to those kinds of things. If you're new to New Life Community Church and the kinds of things that we're doing and starting to do, go ahead and hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Usually it's the lower right-hand. It looks like a little tree is the church logo. Hit that so that you will be notified and you'll see the videos from the church as they come out. Like, share, comment, all that kind of stuff is super helpful in us getting the word out and also us knowing that you were here and appreciating what we're doing. So that would be fantastic. What I want to do now is I want to just read you a little bit from the guide here. So the study starts out like this. There's kind of an introduction, and it says, "A cup of cold water can speak volumes. A generous word can be like water on parched land. We don't know how much we need it until someone takes the time to give it to us. Consider the acts of service that we can do for one another." And this is great. Caring for someone else's child. Offering your skills when they're needed and somebody doesn't have those skills. Giving someone a ride to the airport, just doing simple things. These are small things, but they can make a huge difference, not only in the practical help that they can provide, but just in the message of how important another person is to us and that they're cared about and loved. But we love not only with actions, but we also love with words. Consider the messages we have the power to give to another person. We can just tell them, you are loved, you are valued. Right? Your contribution matters. These things are really important, and they have potential to make lasting and deep impacts on those that those words are spoken to. It seems so simple, but it is really, really powerful. So with that in mind, I want to invite you, if you have a Bible, open it to Luke chapter 10, beginning with verse 25. And I want to just read the Bible passage, and I'll make some comments as we go along and try to highlight some of the more important pieces. And again, if you have any questions, leave a question in the comments. That will be helpful not only for this digital version of the study, but also as part of the church's ministry. You're watching this now, but on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. via Zoom, there will be a live discussion about this passage, and you can bring your questions there. But if you leave your question in the comments here, I can address them there, and I can type out a response here as well. So, Luke chapter 10, beginning with verse 27, it says this: "One day, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus." I would just make a quick comment there. So he's testing Jesus. This isn't a genuine question that he's about to ask, but he's using it as a test, and he kind of thinks he's superior. And this is one of the problems with religious people in general, in particular religious experts. And I would put myself into that category. I've got years and years of training and study and stuff like that, but it's so easy to become arrogant and to think that we're superior. That's why humility is such a key value within Christianity and so important to really connect with God and with our neighbors, is because of the temptations to feeling superior. So an expert in the religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question: "Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus replied, "What does the law of Moses say? How do you read it?" The man answered, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "Right," Jesus told him. "Do this and you will live." The man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. That's important. Just pay attention. This was a Jewish man. It wasn't just anyone. It was a Jewish man. This is important. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, another Jewish man, but a Jewish man who is an expert in the law, right? A priest came along. And when he saw the man, the Jewish businessman, presumably, lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. See, just knowing God's law doesn't actually translate sometimes into doing God's law. Knowing what's right is very different from doing what's right, right? So the priest, the religious professional, crossed the road and stayed away from his Jewish brother. And then a Levite, or in the translation I'm reading, it says a temple assistant, right? So this is also a religious person, someone that would be respectable in society. A temple assistant, a Levite, walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side of the road. So this is also another Jewish person. And then verse 33. Then a despised Samaritan. Now, you have to know a few things about the Samaritans. The Samaritans were mixed race. They were socially outcasts from the Jews, partly because of their mixed race, and they were considered religious heretics. They had an alternate temple in a different place. They didn't believe the same things that all the Jewish people did. They didn't want to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and stuff like that. So this is someone who's a different race, doesn't believe the same way that the Jewish people do. A despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. The religious people saw the man and they were afraid, but the Samaritan saw the man and he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn or a hotel where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man, and if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here." And then Jesus presumably looks up or looks deeply into the eyes of the expert in the religious law that had asked him the question. He says, "Which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits?" Now, it's important to notice here a few things. First of all, in order to serve others, there are 6 things you have to do. You have to see others, right? But the priest and the Levite and the Samaritan, they all saw the man who was in need. But you have to see the other people. And then the second thing is you have to feel compassion, right? So the priest and the Levite, they saw, but they felt fear. Or they saw, but they felt sort of negative feelings. Or they saw, but whatever it was, they didn't feel compassion because they didn't end up going to help. So you have to see, and you have to see with compassion. So the second thing is compassion. The third thing that is just absolutely essential to blessing others is you have to be willing to go to them, right? You can't just see and feel bad, but you have to be willing to do something. And this says that he went over to him. And you don't just go over to him, because that's the third thing. But the fourth thing is he put the man on his own donkey, right? We have to be willing to give of ourselves. And then it says he took care of him. So we have to see with compassion or feel compassion. We have to be willing to go to another person to bless them. We have to be willing to take care of them. And then it says, in the end, he handed him over to the innkeeper. And this is about longer term blessing, but we have to be willing to see with compassion, to go. We have to be willing to take care, and then we have to be willing to hand off. So those are 5 things that this person did. And I missed one back towards the beginning. It says the Samaritan soothed his wounds. So he went over to him and he ministered to him on the spot before putting him on his own donkey and taking him and then handing him off to the next person who could help him. If you want to bless people, these are 6 different stages where it's super important. Now, there's a number of dynamics that you want to not miss. The first is the racial dynamic, and that's so relevant for right now in our country, right? The Samaritan was the racial outcast, the religious outcast. He's the hero of the story. Why? Because he was a neighbor to the other person. So that's the other thing I want you to notice, in addition to the racial dynamic, is I want you to notice that the religious scholar's question is, who is my neighbor? And by its very nature, that question is somehow limiting, right? It's so who's in and who's out? And Jesus reframes the question through his story. And he says the proper question, because the answer was correct: love God and love neighbor. Love God and love our neighbor, right? Jesus acknowledged that that's the correct answer. But when we're thinking about our neighbor, it's not who can we exclude, but Jesus flips the question, and it's no longer who is my neighbor, but who am I a neighbor to? Let me ask just a few questions before we go. Sort of questions of the day, questions to think about. In light of this passage, what is God asking you to do? In light of this passage, how can you go out and be a blessing to someone? And when are you going to do it? What help or whose help do you need? And who can you share this message with, or who can you share this study with? Thanks so much for joining. I want you to have a great day. And if you're available this Thursday night, June 4th, at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we would love to have you join us to discuss this very passage digitally. And the Zoom ID and the password are in the description. Thanks.